So you got questions about the HOA. What the hell is an HOA and what exactly do they do? Well, we're here with Anthony Russo. He's going to talk to us about legally what they're involved, what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do and stuff like that. Everything that you need to know about that. Let's talk about it right now. Anthony, let's talk. Help us understand the role of the HOA in a real estate transaction.
Sure. So, homeowners associations, or HOAs as they call them, are a collective group of homes that have a certain legal function. I guess it's an organization that's part of certain communities that are. It's sometimes it's incorporated in the deeds or it's in the documents for that development when it was first developed. In a sense, that homeowner association, they may collect monies to maintain common roads. Some of them are simple as some communities have benefits such as pools or tennis courts, and the HOA just takes care of that. It's basically a common area of the development you live in that has to be funded from all of those homeowners. And that homeowners association is a separate entity that requires certain dues or fees to maintain those benefits, whatever they may be. So again, they can be simple as maintaining certain roads, certain amenities, or it could even be larger than that, depending on the type of property that it is. Condominiums have a huge HOA to take care of all the common areas, which is pretty much all the property, the landscaping, the pools, golf courses, whatever they may have. Similar to, a co-op has a management company that manages for the cooperative, but it's definitely a different animal. The HOA is could be big or small depending on the development you live in.
All right, so I'm getting some questions in here, and plus we're having a little internet interruption. So I'm just looking at some of the questions that we got coming in. What are the key legal rights of a HOA for a homeowner within the HOA, and how can they effectively exercise their rights of both daily living and dispute resolutions in certain scenarios?
Well, it's no one's going to like the answer, but it depends on the HOA governing documents. So whatever establishes that HOA, whether it be an offering plan when the community was developed and approved by the state, depending on the type of development it is, or certain easements, covenants, and restrictions they're called that are recorded with the properties. Like I live in a community that does not have fancy amenities, but it has a small HOA that runs a pool and tennis area. Every home that buys in that development must be part of that HOA, and you must pay a small amount, $700 a year, whether you want to participate or not. Those are the obligations. You don't have many rights other than you can vote for the board elections, who gets approved to run on the board. You can vote on certain matters that affect you as homeowners, but your rights are very limited. You have to participate to own in that area, and you have to pay whether you use it or not. And the benefits are that those amenities are available to you under the rules that have been established 30, 40, 50, or whatever years ago. There's very limited, I'm going to say, rights that you have, other than being an owner of a company. If I own stock in Apple, I don't get to dictate how Apple runs. I certainly may get to vote depending on the type of stock I have or rights I have, but they're very limited. I don't know if that answers it, but that's the best way I could
No,
explain it.
you answered two questions. My next question was going to be, do homeowners have to comply to these standards? And you pretty much answered. The answer is yes.
Yeah, like some some homeowner associations may have requirements about fencing, what type of fencing, how high the fencing could be, if you can have it on a corner lot, and if you do not comply, they can and will sue you to enforce those rules or regulations. Likewise, if a homeowner wants to challenge that rule, he or she can do that. But again, if you bought into this development and those were the rights that were in the governing bylaws, and you're pretty much restricted to follow those rights unless you can prove that there's a reason they should not be enforced. But if the whoever formed this HOA and everyone else who is part of it is adhering to that, it's pretty hard for one person to say, I don't want to do it. It's almost impossible.
All right, so this is a fair question. What legal steps should a homeowner take if they believe the HOA is violating their rights?
Well, that's important. If the HOA is violating their rights, that person, a homeowner, should get an attorney who will enforce their rights, their civil rights, or whatever rights they may be. One, by checking the bylaws or governing documents to see that the HOA is operating within those bylaws or rules. And if they are, then the second part is, are they violating civil rights that may not have anything to do with what's in the bylaws, but, whether it might be discrimination or whatever it could be, that there definitely can be violations beyond what's in the bylaws. So it's a twofold test, I guess I'd say, but definitely get an attorney, speak to an attorney about those issues immediately. And an attorney you can sue the HOA if they are running afoul of their own rules or other rules or laws, such as discriminating or civil rights. They certainly don't have the right to just do what they want.
I think one of the important things is when you're buying into a property basically that has an HOA, any attorney basically that you're working with is going to get you all the information about the rules and regulations of that. You're going to get that from the agent, and the attorney basically is going to require that. So basically, you're going to go over that basically with your agent and also with the attorney, so that way you understand what you're getting into if you decide you want to move forward. But it's always good to look at the rules beforehand. That way you're not surprised by stuff later on.
Yeah.
Another question that we have coming up. All right, this is basically more catered to people who are buying or selling, and this is pretty much what are the closing costs and who's responsible for paying them when it comes to the HOA.
Well, again, that's a difficult one to answer. It all depends on how the HOA is set up. Each HOA has different rules and requirements. So quite simply, usually in the simplest version, if an HOA exists and there's an annual fee for it, the seller owner would have to pay that fee. And then when they close, if they paid for a portion of the year they have not used, they can a portion, we call it adjust, prorate that amount with the buyer so that the buyer pays for their half a year or whatever period of time they're taking over. But in a traditional HOA, could be a new construction, for example, if I'm buying a townhouse or whatever type of property in a community that has an HOA. Those HOAs, especially when they're first set up, all have different protocols. Many of them charge the buyer and the seller for different things. They charge the seller for an administration fee. They may charge the seller a transfer fee or a legal fee. And then they charge the buyer those same types of fees. They may charge inspection fees or move-in fees or whatever they think may affect them. Administration is the biggest fee. But the last part I want to make sure I touch upon is, especially when there's these new types of developments, a lot of times they fund these developments or fund the kiddies to keep these things going and to have these amenities by making a buyer, usually less likely a seller, contribute a month or two or a certain amount to initiate themselves into this HOA. So if you're buying an HOA unit and it might have been existed for 10 years, it doesn't matter. The buyers may be charged, there's a set fee. It might be $2,500 each HOA, each buyer has to pay as an initial contribution to the HOA to put you into that. And that $2,500 is part of the kitty that the HOA uses to operate and to fund parties or development or whatever they do. But those requirements are all set forth in each particular HOA set of documents. So whether you're buying a co-op, a condo, or a house, anything that has some type of common ownership, an HOA, you definitely want to see those rules and regulations and bylaws and fees as early as you can. Sometimes you don't get them until later in the process, but you want to know, and the documents will generally spell out what types of transfer fees, administration fees, or initial contributions may be required, so you know what's ahead. But it's generally split between buyers and sellers, and it depends on the rules of that particular HOA.
All right, you kind of touched upon this already. This is a question regarding the financial stability of a HOA. I know that most attorneys usually ask for whatever they can get from the seller. They want to make sure that it's financially healthy, basically, whatever it is, whether it's a condo co-op or anything that has a HOA involvement.
A co-op usually more so, because remember, again, I don't want to get too far off, but when you buy into a co-op, you're buying shares of stock in this corporation. You don't really own the property per se. You own shares in a corporation that gives you a lease. You want to make sure that that co-op is financially sound, because remember, if some other co-op shareholders or unit owners don't pay their share, you as the other co-op owner or other shareholders will be responsible for that share. So with a co-op, it's unique. An HOA is basically just collecting money on behalf of all the 8 homeowners to operate certain common elements, but each homeowner really pays their own costs and fees for their units in and of themselves. So it's not as critical to see the financial strength of an HOA overall, but the HOA fees could keep going up, just like for a timeshare, maintenance can go up, or a co-op maintenance can go up if they're not funded properly, they're not budgeted properly, or they're not run properly. The costs can get out of hand, and the homeowners will bear the cost of that. If there's fraud, sometimes there's shareholders or board members that commit fraud. The homeowners or people who are part of that HOA are going to make up that shortfall if it's not covered by insurance. So definitely, the fees involved and the financial strength and viability of that HOA is important.
All right, I'm just looking through the questions as they're coming in, and I'm trying to stay on task on the subject that we're talking about, which is HOAs and the legal aspects, what you're legal obliged to do as a buyer and a seller. So I'm just looking through some of these questions, and you kind of mentioned a lot of these things. We kind of addressed majority of these questions that came in.
I mean, HOAs are
There are
generally
a couple
looked
of questions.
at as, God, I'm sorry. I was going to say HOAs are generally looked
No,
at
no, no,
as a
go
good
ahead.
thing because they try to benefit the common owners, the development as a whole, and the costs are generally, I don't want to say routine, but they're average or across the board, and they're in addition to what you pay for your own property and maintenance. So it's kind of a small addition in a sense, whereas a co-op it could be a bigger component, but still. In depending on the type of HOA that you have and the amenities they have, and if the HOA is short money and every roof has to be replaced, and the roof is their responsibility, that could be a big burden on all of the owners in that development. So again, it could be a disaster as well.
Looking through some of the questions, you addressed the majority of what we discussed. The last question I have for you is basically, what steps should I take? This is for a seller. What steps should I take if the buyer breaches the contract or the deal falls through? What's his legal recourse and strategies of mitigating their losses? It's not really HOA, but it's kind of tied
Okay.
in a little.
Yeah, I mean, well, generally as a seller, you have a little bit more leverage because remember, the buyer had to give a deposit to hold the contract, to sign the contract. So as a seller, you have the buyer's deposit money. So your attorney will be able to hold that deposit money if they're entitled to do so under the terms of the contract if the buyer did breach. In the end, it may result in litigation to see who's entitled to that deposit, whether you get to keep it or the buyer will get it back. But your rights are that if the buyer has defaulted, your attorney would retain that deposit and to enforce your rights. And whether you commence an action for breach against the buyer or the buyer sues you for breach, to flesh it out and see who wins. And in the end, though, it's costly, time sensitive litigation that really doesn't get anyone where they want to be. You selling it, buyer buying it. So a lot of times we'll just work out a resolution that gets everyone even and lets you move on. Depending on your position, if you're the seller, your losses, your damages, you can seek to get those back from the buyer. And likewise, if the buyer feels that the seller breached, the buyer can try to get their damages back from the seller, including the benefit of the bargain, meaning if they can't find a similar house for that same price and now prices have gone up, in theory the buyer can try to get that back from the seller. Or it's called specific performance, which is where one party tries to enforce the contract to make the other party perform. So I don't know if I've answered you, but those are all the
You
viable
did. You
rights.
did. All right. We want to keep this in a positive note. So, any words of encouragement you can give any of these sellers out there who are pretty much right now, as we're taping this, we're in February, ending of February. It's the spring selling season at this moment. Any words of encouragement to our sellers and the buyers, or the people who are buying and selling at the same time, and the buyers?
Well, again, the market is still active. It's going to get even better in the spring. If you're part of an HOA, definitely keep up with the requirements. Make sure your property isn't in disrepair or that you're not in arrears in your HOA. You don't want to give them any reason to deny or kind of complicate the sale. You don't want to have an arrears where it's a lien and it becomes more expensive or problematic to sell your property. So, just keep on top of your requirements, perform the best you can, and try to get the information you need so that when you have a buyer, you're ready to transfer that HOA, those rights and the expenses, so the buyer knows, and you as a seller can say to take this HOA, it costs you this much, and the realtor can market the property properly with that information.
I think a lot of people are kind of like me. We work best with a checklist. So if you do need a checklist, let us know. Maybe myself and Anthony, we can put something together, basically provide a checklist for you. And then that way, when you are ready to sell, you can use the checklist and you can call us and we can help you with that as well. Anthony, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing these videos. And I hope people got some value out of this. If you have any questions, we're always looking for new topics that we can utilize Anthony's as his resource, his mind. Basically, he's a legal, I want to say encyclopedia. I don't know for the kids probably don't know what an encyclopedia.
What's that?
Encyclopedia was our Google back in the day
Uh,
when we actually had to pick up books. But anyway,
Thank you, Evans. Yeah, I appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. So basically, if you have any questions or any scenarios that you have, you want us to do some videos, or if you just want have a conversation with us, that's what we're here for. We're here to answer your questions. So utilize us as resources to you and your real estate needs, whether it's buying, selling, or investing in real estate. That's all the time that we have for today. If you have anything you want to discuss, give us a call. You can find us on social media. You can find us wherever you're seeing this at. Reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you. And you got
Thank
the
you.
last word.
No, again, appreciate the time. Anyone needs any help, please reach out.